Good afternoon. I think we'll get started now. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Jackie Gillen, and I am president of Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety. Advocates is a coalition of the leading consumer health and safety groups and property and casualty insurance companies that are working together to advance safer cars, safer drivers, and safer roads. Today, we are pleased to announce the introduction of legislation, the Hot Cars Act of 2017. And the acronym stands for Helping Overcome Trauma for Children Alone in Rear Seats. This legislation is essential to save the lives of children who are unknowingly left behind in vehicles and dying of heat stroke. We also need to spare families the unspeakable heartbreak of such tragic and needless deaths. And today you are going to hear some of those stories from those families. The timing of the bill's introduction coincides with the kickoff of the National Vehicular Heat Stroke Prevention Campaign by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Education is important to make the public aware of the dangers, but it must be combined with a technology solution to save the lives of children. That is why we are here today to discuss the need to enact the Hot Cars Act, and that it is now time to move forward with a technology solution. Already this year, 9 children have died in hot cars, and the scorching temperatures of summer have not even started and are still ahead of us. While these deaths can happen at any time of the year, even in temperatures as low as 60 degrees, the hot summer months pose severe risk for these preventable tragedies. And as you can see on the map next to me, these deaths are happening in nearly every state across the country. I am joined here today by the sponsors of the Hot Cars Act, Representative Tim Ryan of Ohio, Jan Schakowsky of Illinois, and hopefully Peter King of New York will be joining. Oh, you're here. Thank you.
I came through the ceiling.
I know, you should have tapped me on the shoulder. Okay, thank you. And we will also be joined by Dr. David Diamond, as well as the founder and president of KidsandCars.org, Jeanette Fennell, and the several brave and caring families that have come here today to talk about this deadly problem and share their stories so that other parents will not have to suffer. On average, 37 children die every year as a result of vehicular heat stroke. These deaths are agonizing, yet they are completely avoidable. There is proven and available technology that can alert the driver when a child is left in a vehicle. The approach taken in this bill is a proven strategy for ensuring technologies are standard equipment to protect every passenger in every car and every ride. Auto manufacturers are aggressively promoting and consumers are enthusiastically buying new cars equipped with rear view cameras. But next year, all new 2018 vehicles will be required to have rear view cameras as standard equipment. Why? Because in 2005, Congress passed legislation and responded to another child safety problem by directing the U.S. Department of Transportation to improve rear visibility in passenger vehicles. This was a tremendous safety victory that was championed by 2 members that are joining us today, Representative Peter King and Representative Jan Schakowsky. And that rear view visibility standard is going to save hundreds, if not thousands, of lives. There are more than 25 organizations representing national and consumer public health and medical groups that are supporting this bill. It is really a who's who of all of the major child advocacy groups. We have law enforcement as well. We have emergency responders. We have the American Association of Pediatrics. All of these groups have come together, and I have to tell you, I work on a lot of safety issues, and this is one where I have never seen so many people step forward and say, yes, we need to do something about this right away. I appreciate your joining us today. As I said, we are here today. We are standing here to urge enactment of the Hot Cars Bill because we refuse to stand by and let children die month after month, year after year in hot cars when we have a solution. So I would like now to introduce our speakers. Before I do that, I want to tell you that all of the press materials, everybody's statements, the press release, and all of this information are on our website, Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety. It's www.saferoads.org. Again, www.saferoads.org. And our first speaker is going to be U.S. Representative Tim Ryan of Ohio. He is a champion for families, and he's also a member of the House Appropriations Committee, yet perhaps more importantly, Congressman Ryan is a father who cares deeply about this issue. He is motivated to prevent this from happening to others. His concern is what led to the sponsorship of the Hot Cars Bill. Thank you so much for your leadership and for joining us today. Okay,
Thank you, Jackie, and it's great to be here with Representative Schakowsky and Representative King. We're here for one reason and one reason only, and that's to save lives. This is something that is tragic, and the families that are here know it all too well, and we're here as legislators to try to prevent this from ever happening again. And we hear a lot today about a lot of technology that's coming down the pike. We hear about driverless cars. We get into our car and there's a bell and a whistle for just about everything that we could possibly do wrong or forget. And there is absolutely no reason why we can't have the technology available in cars today that will allow a parent who's hustling around, stressed out, running from here to there, to get a bell or a ding or a vibration, something that's auditory, something that's visual, that will allow you to recognize that you may have a kid in your car. There's no reason why we can't do that. And so we're here today to help prevent the 37 deaths that we have seen in previous years from ever happening again. Now, we talked already about the technology that already exists, and we can prevent many of these tragedies from happening. We know that the temperature inside a car can get up to 125 degrees within a matter of minutes, and that a baby or child's body overheats 3 to 5 times faster than an adult body. So this is a deadly situation. So our legislation requires the Secretary of Transportation to issue a rule requiring all new passenger motor vehicles to be equipped with a child safety alert system. I'd like to commend General Motors, who already deploys an example of this technology, a rear seat reminder feature in multiple vehicles in the 2018 model year, including the Buick, the Cadillac, the Chevrolet, and the GMC. But we have no current requirement for cars that have this simple feature that will help save the lives of children across the country, and we believe this is inexcusable. Most of these cases happen when loving and responsible parents unknowingly leave their child behind in the car as the result of a change in routine, a simple distraction, or stress or fatigue. And even as the weather begins to cool, children are still at risk for heat stroke, and children unfortunately died in vehicles with temperatures as low as 52 degrees. This is something that we can do, and I told the parents who are here to testify. This is about saving kids' lives, period. And there is no reason why the United States government, our Department of Transportation, can't require simply for the industry to make this available on every car that gets produced here in the United States.
Thank you very much. I'd now like to introduce Representative Jan Schakowsky. She is the ranking Democrat on the House Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Digital Commerce and Consumer Protection, which is jurisdiction over motor vehicle safety. Throughout the years, Representative Schakowsky has authored numerous consumer protection and safety bills. She not only was a force in getting the Cameron Gilbranson Kids Transportation Safety Act enacted into law, but for the next 6 years, she hounded the Department of Transportation and the Secretary of Transportation and the White House to get this rule issued, and she finally did. She is a force of nature when fighting for families. Thank you so much for your support and involvement.
This is a very emotional issue. I'm looking at parents who are in the front row and who have suffered from the consequences of not having the kind of technology that would have told them that their child is in the car. I'm so proud to be here with all the advocates, with my Republican colleague Peter King, and with Tim Ryan from Ohio. This should be a nonpartisan, bipartisan piece of legislation. This is Vehicle Heat Stroke Prevention Week, and we are coming into the hottest months of the year right now. Do you know that since 1990, nearly 800 children have died from heat stroke in vehicles? Think of the families that still are suffering from that tragedy. It's not enough to just educate parents about the risk. Even the most attentive parent can get distracted, and we need and can have safety features in our vehicles. A simple alert could save lives. You get a warning when you leave the keys in the car. You should get a warning if you leave a child in the car. As was mentioned earlier, I was the chief sponsor, along with Peter King, of getting legislation passed that would require, starting in 2018 in all new cars, a camera rear view so that you can see and prevent running over a child. Do you know when that bill passed? That bill passed in 2008. And it is in 2018 that it will finally go into effect. We can't wait that long for this kind of simple legislation to finally pass. And so I just want to underscore the courage, the bravery of the families that have suffered this tragedy, coming forward to tell their story that I believe in my heart will make sure that we're able to pass this legislation, that we're going to have this simple remedy added, as Congressman Ryan said, to the many bells and whistles that we have in the cars. This one will save lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jan. I now have the pleasure of introducing Representative Peter King. Advocates has worked on many highway and auto safety laws, and it's absolutely true that these deaths and injuries occur in red states, in blue states, in Republican districts, and in Democratic districts, and that all of the issues are bipartisan, nonpartisan. And Representative King was an early sponsor and champion of the rear view camera legislation. He became involved because one of his constituents, a pediatrician, Dr. Greg Gilbranson, accidentally backed over his 2-year-old in their driveway because of a blind zone. He immediately jumped in and wanted to ensure that this never happened again. And it's that same commitment to safety that led him to be an original co-sponsor of this legislation. And we are so pleased to have you here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jackie. And I want to thank you for all your efforts over the years for auto safety, child safety. And let me especially thank Tim Ryan, the sponsor of this legislation. I commend him for coming forward and really leading the way for us. And Jan Schakowsky and I worked very closely on the rear view camera legislation, which was more of a fight than it should have been, and it's taken longer to implement than it should. But the reality is it is going to be done. I want to thank Jan for the great work, and really, you're right, she never stops. When she gets into something, she's the best person to have on your side. The main purpose, as I see this legislation today, is to spare any parents, grandparents, family members from going through what has to be an unspeakable tragedy. I have 2 grandchildren, I have 2 children, and I just can't imagine how that would have been. And I also can fully understand how this can happen. How this can happen certainly unintentionally. You can be the most conscientious parent of all and still have this happen. So as both Tim and Jan have said, we have warnings and indicators for the trunk being open, keys being left in the car, the door not being fully closed. We can go on with all of these extra apparatus we have for items that are important but not that important. Certainly not as important as saving a child's life. So I put no credence at all if the auto industry or anyone else pushes back on this. This is saving human lives. The fact that 37 children die every year, when you just think of that, and such a simple remedy is there. So I fully support this legislation. It should be bipartisan, nonpartisan. It should be American legislation. And I'm proud to stand with Tim and Jan and all others who want to fight, and all of the parents and family members who are here today. I commend you for your courage in carrying on in the face of such an unspeakable tragedy. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Representative King. I would now like to ask to join us Dr. David Diamond, who is a professor at the University of South Florida. It would probably take an additional 15 minutes if I read all of his titles to you. But I just want to say that he is an expert. He has been studying the brain and memory for nearly 40 years. And he will explain to us how and why this happened and how and why we can prevent it from happening. So thank you very much for joining us today.
I'd like to thank you for inviting me to participate in today's activities. As you had just said, I've been studying the brain and memory for almost 40 years. But frankly, I was unprepared when a reporter called me about 12 years ago, and he said to me, as a memory expert, can you explain why so many children have died in cars after being forgotten by their parents? And I was taken aback by it, and I have to say I responded more as a parent than a scientist because I'd never heard of it. I couldn't imagine how a parent could forget a child in a car. And frankly, I don't think I was of much value to the reporter at the time. Not only was it intriguing to me and difficult to understand that parents forget kids in cars, but in addition, parents go about their activities throughout an entire day being unaware that their child is in the car. So the scientist in me was curious as to how this could happen. And I greatly benefited from the database of Jeanette Fennell's KidsInCars.org, in which I could study hundreds of cases in which children died in cars. I then interviewed parents myself, and I've served as an expert witness in cases in which parents have been charged with manslaughter and even murder. One thing that's very clear to me is that this is not about negligence. These are not bad parents. These are not parents who don't care about their children. What's very clear to me is this is about the frailty, the flaws of the brain. These are the flaws in our memory. And we need to understand it at a scientific level and therefore approach it with modern technology. Just a bit about the brain is that we have multiple organs within our brain. Each one functions differently, and in particular related to memory. And so we have one brain structure which allows us to hold on to new information, but very tenuously. This brain structure is called the hippocampus, and it holds on to the information, but it is easy to lose that in times of stress or distraction. We have another brain structure called the basal ganglia. The basal ganglia is what allows us to do things automatically by habit. We talk about this all the time. We just do things without thinking about it. And the really important thing about the basal ganglia is that when it gets activated, it suppresses the hippocampus. And so when it suppresses the hippocampus, you do things out of habit. And so a rather benign and common example is if you're on your way home and you plan to stop at the store. and you drive right by the store, even though you have every intention to stop. This is the dynamics between hippocampus and basal ganglia. The basal ganglia has made you lose awareness that you had planned to stop at the store. Now that sounds rather trivial, but ramp it up and consider that you needed to stop at the store to be able to pick up medication. And now the pharmacy is closed. Ramp it up further. You're aware that you've just turned your headlights on, and then when you exit the car, you need to shut the headlights off. It is your hippocampus that's trying to tell you to shut the headlights off. Well, if you exit the car and you lose awareness that the headlights are on, you're potentially now facing a dead battery. So potentially a tragic situation. And so we have technology that is compensated for this failure of our brain memory system. We get a reminder when our headlights are on. The same phenomenon is happening when parents are forgetting children in cars. We have this interaction between the basal ganglia that is taking us along a route that we've traveled many times and not always with the child. And so we lose awareness of the child. I'd like to share with you why this is also personal for me. 9 years ago, I became a grandfather. A few months after that, I was driving with my wife. My infant grandchild was in the back seat, sleeping soundly, facing away from us. When we arrived at our destination, where I had traveled hundreds of times before, but without the child, I exited the car, and I had completely lost awareness that my grandchild was in the car. Fortunately, my wife was with me, or this could have been a tragedy. The other aspect of this is that this false memory, the brain creates a false memory that the child is actually where the child belongs. The parent that's intending to take the child to daycare then leaves the child in a car, but the brain, in some way we don't understand, has created a memory that gives the parent absolute confidence that the child is in daycare or wherever the child belongs. And this is something we don't fully understand, but false memories are very common. If you believe something has happened, then you make the memory that it actually did happen. And this is currently a great study going on to understand this phenomenon. But this is the second aspect that we need to understand. So, in summary, what I'm talking about is how this is normal brain functioning, to have competition between these brain areas. We have the habit memory system, which allows us to do things without thinking about it. We have the hippocampus, which allows us to have new information, which we are holding tenuously in our memory. And that basal ganglia then blocks the hippocampus. And what's critical is how we lose awareness of that information. And then for some reason, the brain creates this false memory that our child is safe. So it is essential that we have the technology to remind us that our children are in the cars in the times when they are in such great danger. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Diamond. I'd now like to ask Deona Ryan Bayan to join us. Deona has traveled here from Charleston, South Carolina to lend her support. She is the mother of Ashlyn, who died on February 7, 2004 at the age of 1 after unknowingly being left in a hot car. Thank you so much.
In 2003, my family welcomed a very loved little girl named Ashlyn Paige Tallulah Ryan. She was a beautiful, blue-eyed, happy baby. She loved to sing, and she dearly loved the ocean. She was the light of my life and the glue that made our blended family complete. But little did my family know, but her journey in life would be very short. February 5th, 2004, a few days after her first birthday, I left for work at my new job as she was getting ready to be dropped off at the sitter's house. When I left home, she was tugging on her daddy's pant leg, too busy playing to stop and give Mommy a kiss goodbye. With a book in hand, she wanted to have him read to her before they left for the morning. That would be the last time I heard my sweetheart singing or saw her beautiful smile. It was a relatively mild temperature of 82 degrees in Hawaii, and I was planning to leave work early for the day. I had left a message for my sitter to let her know that I would be picking Ashlyn up earlier than normal. but about an hour later, her father called me to tell me that he was on his way to the sitter's house and that an ambulance had been called. I quickly rushed out the door and made my way to the hospital where my daughter was being transported. When I arrived at Kapiolani Hospital, I was immediately taken to the trauma room where she was. The only thing that I recall hearing are that her temperature was at 106 degrees and her oxygenation level was only at 80%. To my nightmare, the doctors were diligently trying to intubate her. As a medical professional, I knew the gravity of the situation, but as a mother, I was completely in shock. Aslan suffered global brain damage from the effects of heat stroke and lack of oxygen to her brain because she had been left in the car for 50 minutes and it was very hot. My beautiful baby struggled to survive for 3 days in a pediatric intensive care where she had been given continuous blood transfusions and treatment, but her little organs began to shut down. She died from the injury she suffered when her sitter had inadvertently forgot her in the car. Many changes in our normal routine had attributed to the events of that day. I had started a new job, working more days a week, and she would be at the sitter's house more days a week. The sitter was driving a different car than she normally did. Aslan's seating position was directly behind her, and which caused her to be out of the line of sight when she was in the car. These similar events have happened to many people every day. These events account for the thousands of near misses, an average of 37 deaths per year. Since 1990, there have been over 800 children that are gone due to hot car deaths, families who suffer a lifetime of heartache having lost a child in this way. I wanted to change what happened to my child while helping others in whatever way that I could. And in 2007, Governor Linda Lingle of Hawaii honored my daughter when she signed a new Hawaii law. This law would protect those who rescue children from the cars and put educational components in place to educate drivers who are taking the driver's exam and for those that are renting cars in the state. Though education is important, education is just a layer, and unfortunately, it is a layer that many people do not feel that they need to know. I can say that I had felt the same way, but it did happen to me, and it did happen to hundreds of other parents, good, loving parents, and even grandparents. As busy Americans, we need more than one layer of safety to protect the most innocent, priceless, and precious cargo that we carry in our vehicles. We need added alerts and reminders as another layer of safety protection. I strongly believe that if there had been an alert in the car that my sitter was driving, my beautiful baby would be here today. My daughter is now just a memory, a lingering pain, a hole in my heart. I only now have a headstone that I can hug. I live my life now and what time that I would have spent raising my daughter, doing everything that is in my power to make sure that no one else ever suffers from this pain and heartache. I reach out and comfort other families who have suffered this kind of loss, for no one could ever understand what we live through every single day. We now unite as grieving parents here before you today to ask you for a long overdue alert system in our cars so that they can prevent these tragedies from happening to more families. We all long for the day that no other children will join ours in heaven. Thank you.
I would like to now ask Dr. Norman Collins to join us. Dr. Collins came from Raleigh, North Carolina to be here with us today. He is the grandfather of Norman Lee Van Bishop Collins III, who died on May 29, 2011, when he was just 3 months old. He was unknowingly left in a hot car in Mississippi. Thank you.
May 29, 2011 is a date that is etched in the chronicle of times in the hearts of me and my family. It is a day when I received a phone call from a church friend who informed me that my son, Norman II, needed me to come to Clarksdale, Mississippi right away because something had happened to my 3-month-old grandson, Norman Collins III, who was affectionately known as Bishop. After several more frantic phone calls, I eventually received word that our dear Bishop was dead, the victim of heat stroke after unknowingly being left in his parents' hot car in a church parking lot on a 93-degree Sunday afternoon, all due to a miscommunication. Grief-stricken, all I could remember was the pain in my heart I had not felt since I witnessed the death of my mother 10 years earlier. The horror that I and my family encounter at the mere thought of Bishop being buckled in his car seat, crying relentlessly, sweating profusely, seizing uncontrollably, and extending his little arms for help with no one to attend to him. At times, it is simply too much to bear for any human. As one would imagine, the days since Bishop's death have not been easy, but they've yielded several positives, including bringing to the forefront the need to build awareness and prevention of child safety in and around cars. Yes, Bishop's death was tragic and unintentional. It was the result of confusion and misunderstanding between two people, but above all, it was preventable. I've thought so many times how effective and valuable prevention messages and methods would have been towards saving our dear Bishop and countless others, including the 9 children this year who have succumbed to child hot car deaths. For this reason, I call upon our lawmaking government officials to assist in the effort by supporting and passing the Hot Cars Act to save lives and avoid any more families having to endure the lifelong horror of grief that ours and so many other families have encountered due to preventable tragedies of hot car deaths. Please help us to turn our pain into power, our tragedy into triumph, and our agony into positive action. We all have a God-given right, responsibility, and reason to protect our children as well as each other. Whereas we cannot change what happened to our precious baby boy Bishop and the over 800 children who have died as a result of heat stroke since 1990. As advocates, parents, teachers, rescuers, legislators, and media, we must do something to help. I challenge each person here today and around the United States to help us by working together and pledge to never stop talking, to never stop raising awareness, and to never stop working to require technology in all vehicles to make hot car deaths a thing of the past. Thank you.
I'd now like to ask Miles and Carol Harrison to join us. They're from Purcellville, Virginia. These are parents of Chase, who died on July 8, 2008, at the age of 21 months after being unknowingly left in a hot car. And I just want to tell you how much respect and admiration I have for all these families. This is not easy to come up here and publicly share these stories and to relive probably the worst thing that could ever happen to a parent or grandparent. And I'm so appreciative of your sharing these stories, because I think these are the kind of stories that hopefully will motivate and get us this bill enacted as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Almost 9 years ago, it was a typical day of getting everyone up and ready to head out the door, as well as getting myself to work on time. Like many parents, I was multitasking, getting my child ready, making sure we had everything packed, and rushing around with a typical morning business. My world changed forever on that day. When I went to the office, I was focused on fixing all the problems at work because that was my job. The day flew by. I went to lunch with my boss to fill him in on the status of the work, my only break of the day. Then, having no idea what time it was, a colleague came up to me in my office around 5 o'clock. "Hey, do you have a doll in your car?" Stunned, I had no idea why he would ask such a question, and I couldn't imagine what he was talking about. I stood up and started to go through what I had done that day, and then realized, oh my God, no. I rushed to the car and came across the side window, and I saw Chase. I had not dropped him off at daycare. I ripped open the car door, I pulled him from the car seat, unaware of anyone around, and ran into the office with him in my arms, screaming, crying, calling out for help. I was so distraught, upset, and completely incapacitated. I spent hours in the ER. The nurse offered me painkillers, but I refused. I did not feel I deserved them. I wanted to feel the pain. Without any compassion, the police demanded that I be brought to the station immediately and interviewed. They started asking me questions about did I have life insurance on my son. It started to hit me then. I had killed my son. I did it. My poor, sweet boy. God, take me now. And return my son to his beautiful mother. Please, God, not him, me. I had to be hospitalized for several weeks and even register under a fake name because I would have been arrested the moment I left the hospital. Tragically, I was not even allowed to attend the funeral of my son. My story continues with a very public trial, fighting a charge of involuntary manslaughter, of which, thank God, I was found not guilty after 3 days in the courtroom. It really did not matter to me whether I was found guilty or innocent. I considered myself guilty of and full of shame and anger. I cry every day for Chase. I still have not forgiven myself, and I don't know if I have the capacity to do so. I look at my wife in amazement. She has never wavered. She stayed with me, and we are still together. She is the most beautiful and wonderful wife in the world. After my trial, Gene Weingarten wrote a Pulitzer Prize-winning article titled Fatal Distraction about parents who have gone through what my family went through. He somehow was able to capture the essence of how otherwise wonderful parents could be involved in a parent's worst nightmare. He was able to explain this modern-day phenomena in a way that people could understand and relate to. The death of our precious baby boy became an international incident. The Russian government banned all adoptions of American children and named the law after our son Chase. We were bombarded with news articles written about what a terrible person I am and how this could never happen to responsible people. But frankly, the daily beating I give to myself is far more brutal. than anything I have ever read about myself on the internet. This did not have to happen. If there had been a simple chime alert of my son's presence, none of this would have happened. How can this be that in our great country, it is not mandatory that the simplest alarm not be required in all cars? Children are dying unnecessarily. Families are being destroyed unnecessarily. This has got to stop. It is so important that we pass this bill being introduced today. In our son Chase's honor, we have made it our mission to try to prevent this unspeakable tragedy from happening to any parents. Every time we hear of another child dying, we relive that horrible day with them over and over again, and we ask why. Why does this keep happening when there is technology available to prevent it? Every loving, caring parent must realize that this disaster could happen to them. They need to be aware of this phenomenon and make sure Congress mandates a vehicle alarm system to save the lives of our children and eliminate this crushing pain this causes their parents. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miles and Carol. I'd like to now ask Jeanette Fennell to join us. She is president of kidsincars.org. Jeanette is also the current vice chair of Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety and has been on the board of advocates for many, many years. She is a tenacious and persistent advocate and is responsible for several key safety features that most people don't even know what she has done for them, including trunk release mechanism, which is now standard equipment, and as we talked about, rear view cameras. She founded her organization, kidsincars.org, to protect children in and around vehicles. We are so grateful for having her here and for helping to bring this issue to the attention of the public and legislators. Thank you so much, Jeanette.
Thank you, Jackie. As she said, my name is Jeanette Fennell, and I am the president and founder of kidsincars.org. Every summer at kidsincars.org, we brace ourselves because we know we're going to get those phone calls. We know it's going to come across the news feed that another child has suffered and died in a hot car. Everyone talks about almost over 800 children have died in hot cars since 1990. That's 800 children. That's 800 families who are suffering. And try to imagine even enduring that type of loss. As we all agree that the worst thing that can ever happen in a parent's life is the death of a child, how about if you're the person responsible? There is nothing like this. And the fact that it is 100% preventable makes us all want to shed a tear, because this should have been taken care of years ago. You know, we live in an ever-changing world, and this bill is only about utilizing and perfecting the resources we already have access to in order to save children's lives. We do a lot of education. We've sent over 750,000 look before you lock cars to birthing centers around the United States. But education is enough. It's not enough. It is not enough. If it was, maybe this would go away. Because if it just takes a single change in your routine for someone to drive past their daycare center and unknowingly leave their child in the vehicle, the education isn't there to help them. We learned from Dr. Diamond about the unintended consequences that can happen when a baby is out of sight and out of mind. We require that children ride in the back seats. But where is the alarm system to remind us if our sweet innocents, bundles of joy, fall asleep and we fall into our habit memory? We've all talked about the auto industry acknowledging that we are human, that we make mistakes, that we need reminders. Think of the number of reminders that are in your vehicles today. None of them are to remind you if a child's been left alone in a vehicle. Safety is something every family deserves. It shouldn't be an option, and it shouldn't be political. The federal government, our legislators, automakers, along with the safety advocates, have the ability to solve this problem. You know, when we learn about tainted peanut butter or some other issue, the shelves are cleaned off in less than 24 hours. How can we continue to allow innocent babies to die in hot cars with nothing being done? We have been shamefully complacent about allowing these children to die for something that is utterly preventable. For the sake of our children and for all of these families, we must pass this bill into law. We know technology works. Today, technology saves your car battery. Maybe tomorrow, it could save your child's life. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, let me repeat that all of these materials are on our website, www.saferoads.org. We're happy to take questions now. Also, after the conclusion of the press conference, the speakers are available for individual interviews. Thank you very much, yes. And could you please identify yourself before you ask your question?
Yes, I'm Sabrina from Cleveland.com and the Cleveland Plain Dealer. And I wanted to find out what happened with this bill last year. I mean, this is not the first time this has happened. What happened last year, and what will make it happen and actually become law this time around?
Was it Ryan? Do you? I'll give you my perspective on it. As a person who works on these highway safety bills, they take a long time. I think we made reference to the rear view camera bill. That took 2 sessions of Congress before we got it through. And so the bill was introduced late in the last session, and we're very hopeful getting it out there early, getting bipartisan support, that we will see it move during this session.
Yeah, that's basically it. You're asking us to explain Washington, D.C., and I don't know if I can do that, but I think Jackie hit on it. We got it out early this year. It's June. We're going to work it out. We've got great attendance from the media, which I think is going to continue to raise awareness on this issue, and I think we're doing it in a bipartisan way, and I think Representative Schakowsky, who's been down this road before on safety issues, knows better than anybody. It takes a long slog to get some of this stuff done, but I think what we heard today helps move the needle on these things. And I know Jan feels the same way, and Peter, I'm so proud of these families that have you want to know the definition of bravery. It's getting up here and taking such a negative situation and trying to convert it into some life-saving progress in the society. So we're going to keep plugging. I don't know if we have any exact numbers. It's really negligible. Like I said, General Motors is already putting this into the cars as a safety feature, and it's not going to be any more or less than the ding for the seatbelt or the keys or anything else. It's equivalent to that on a cost perspective. So again, there's no real excuse not to do this.
My car says that even when a heavy purse is in the passenger seat, that the passenger side airbag is no longer deployed. I mean, there are very few things that we do here in Congress that are a matter of life and death. and this is definitely one of them. And the cost of doing this compared to all the bells and whistles that are in our automobiles is really negligible compared to the kind of result that we would get in saving lives.
And again, I think the question too is, what's the cost of not doing it? And we know the cost of not doing it. It's 37 kids, babies a year, 800 in the past few years. So, again, we've got to get some clarity on our priorities here.
I mean, I'd also like to add, when it becomes standard equipment, the costs are de minimis. I purchased a new car last year and had to buy a rear view camera packaged with all these other features that I didn't want, and now they're going to be standard equipment. We all have cameras in our cell phones. I mean, this kind of solution, a sensor, when it becomes standard equipment, is, as Representative Ryan said, what is the cost of not doing anything compared to what is the cost of something inexpensive technology like this? Next questions? Any questions?
So this question came in from the webcast. Practically speaking, how would an alert system based on existing technology work? Would it be like in a GM Acadia SUV, where if the back door is open prior to a motorist driving, it would beep when the car engine is shut? Would it be based on the fact that there's weight of a car seat in the back, or what else would it be based on?
I'll just attempt an answer, then I will open it up to others. Yes.
The bill that we're introducing today is not prescriptive in any way. It will say we need an alarm to make sure we are notified when we're leaving our vehicle that something is in the back seat. The automakers are able to do whatever they want to make sure that happens. Allison specifically talked about the GM vehicle that has to do with door sequencing. I mean, that is nothing but software. If you open your vehicle back door 10 minutes before leaving on your trip, when you arrive, you'll get a notice that someone's in the back seat. I think we need to go a little bit further than that because it doesn't really sense that there's a child, but it has to do with sequencing of how our doors open and close. That's software. That's nothing, and it will save lives.
Just to reiterate what Jeanette said, these are performance standards that give the automakers maximum flexibility to meet them. So we expect once the performance standard is issued that different automakers that will purchase these systems from different suppliers will have any number of different systems to alert drivers that they've left a child in the rear seat. Okay? If there are no more questions, let me again thank you all, and let me thank our speakers. I know how difficult it is for the families to share their stories with you. If you would like to have any individual interviews, we're up here. Just come and let us know. Jeanette?
I just want to mention one more thing. We had another parent join us right here. That's Lynn Balfour, and she unknowingly left her beautiful little boy Bryce in a hot car, and he died from hypothermia. She is available for interviews if you would like. Thank you.